Hold on, let me get my camera.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm so excited.
Me too. How's it going?
I'm starting the recording. Is that all right?
Totally fine. Totally fine.
Okay.
I just got off the recording, so we'll just keep the momentum going. So, how are you doing?
Oh, welcome, Brice. I'm so excited to have you on my little show.
That's okay. You know what? We all started off with little shows, so you're a good girl. You're right where you need to be. So don't even worry about that. Your show's going to get bigger as we go. So
anyway, I just want to welcome you because I've been watching you for quite a while in different places. I think one of the first shows I watched of yours was the Glamorous Castle show. That was like a while back. I think it was it like 2 years ago or something like that?
Probably. That was when I first started covering that topic. I don't think I was doing a whole lot of other shows. I was mostly just researching myself. So, and I actually think that the subscribers can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that video might have been taken off of YouTube. So
probably, very likely.
If the videos are off of YouTube, guys, I didn't take them down. YouTube took them down. So right. I must have got something right in that research for them to be taken off the platform. So
yeah, anyway, I've just been watching your work and it's on fire at the moment.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's, I feel like I'm just the conduit. I feel like at this point in my journey, I'm kind of being guided by mostly Magdelene. I feel like it's like her channel now. I think she's the one that kind of is pushing it more into the spiritual, the researching of like where spirituality comes from, what are the truths behind what we've been told in different religions and all that kind of stuff, which is going to be the hardest. That is going to be the hardest nut for people to crack open, I think, in this whole Great Awakening, is to release some of those held beliefs that we've been indoctrinated through in our different religious circles, and which is something that is scary for a lot of people, but necessary in order for us to move forward, for sure.
Yeah, I've been watching a little bit on Aquarius Rising Africa on your Mary Magdelene reveals, and I mean, I'm just very, very excited to be hosting her through you. Because
she's active sometimes. People always like, there are orbs behind you. I'm like, that's Magdelene. that's
yeah.
her.
And I felt her so strongly as I was, getting ready for this call. I could feel her sending me like these Magdelene sort of like mandala images in my DNA, and just roses and love, and it was really beautiful.
Yes, she is a very I know people probably think I'm crazy, but I don't care. We're all a little crazy. But I've been hearing Magdelene audibly speak to me since I was 16. I've told this story on my channel before. I remember being 16 years old. I remember being at my upper school. I had my backpack on and we had a lake, and I remember walking by the lake, and I just remember hearing this voice, Mary Magdelene over and over and over again as I was walking. And I was like, why am I thinking at that point? I mean, I think most of us grew up in the dark ages before there was the internet. So, my research as a child was the Dewey Decimal System, the card catalog looking. So it's not like I could sit down and just Google. Like the only thing I knew about Magdelene at that point was what I had been told in my churches, that she was a prostitute. She, all the stuff that we were told by basically the controllers. Right. And so, and at that point at 16, I wasn't really interested in that kind of stuff. I was more interested in the boys in my class. I wasn't interested in church stuff, but she's kind of followed me around my whole life. And I've always heard her speaking to me and kind of guiding me. And it's become very apparent as to why now at this point in this journey. And yes, it kind of made me emotional when you said that about her, because that's something she has told me to tell people on shows, is that if you're feeling scared or alone, just to call on her and she will be there. It makes me emotional. She will be there.
I know, she was absolutely there for me. And I could feel, her pushing her love into, the sacred feminine in a way, like letting that come about into this planet again.
So, I mean, talk about the feminine that's had her whole story. It's just been completely just just shredded apart by the controllers. I mean, her more than anyone. And she's still, I mean, she's a sassy broad. She's not going to take any shit. You know, she's very a strong spirit, but she's so loving. And I said this on one show, and I can't remember which one I said this on. I think what we forget too about Magdalene is that I think, at least for me, when I see her, it's like she's this young woman that's very strong and smart and beautiful and forceful, but she was also a mother too. You know, she and Yeshua had 5 children.
Wow, I didn't know it was 5. I thought
5 children.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, 5 children. So they had, Sarah's their most famous daughter that we know. There's the Gospel of Sarah that's hidden under the Vatican. But yeah, they had 5 children. And so she herself is a mother. So not only is she this sassy leader of a female, but she's also got the softness of being mother as well. And she knows, as she told me, I know how to hold my children. It makes me emotional. I know how
beautiful.
And so, and I've been telling people, just call on her. You'll feel her. You'll feel her. You'll feel her hug you. She's just waiting for you to call on her, because that's the consent, and she knows how to hug her children, and she knows how to be that mom. And so I'm excited that her name and her story is being corrected.
Yeah, it's very, very important. I mean, it is like a whole major correction that's going on at the moment. And I'd love to hear more about her story and come back to maybe asking you about who her children are and all of that. But if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit, for those people on my little show that haven't maybe ever met you before, if you can just give a little bit of background about yourself and how did you get into this research. And you are under the channel Esoteric Atlanta and doing really incredible work. I mean,
thank you.
Seriously amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, so my name is Brice. I am obviously from Atlanta, Georgia. And I've always been a bit of a nerd when it comes to weird stories. And that's the thing about the folklore and the culture down here in the Southeast. The Southeast is, if you think about Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, we have a lot of ghost stories. And there's this real deep Southern kind of, I mean, my mama was the first one to tell me my ghost story. She grew up near Charleston in South Carolina. And so I kind of always grew up hearing these crazy stories. That my elementary school as a child was an old plantation house that Sherman had stayed in during the Civil War. There was all these crazy things the South is just full of folklore, and it's full of legends, and it's and there's this Southern culture that is very, very yummy. It's very interested. It's just a lot there. And so when lockdown happened, now I was already awake. I was already a Mr. T supporter. I already kind of knew what was going on, but I had not vocally, publicly said anything, because I had started my own program through the yoga shala. I work out of a shala here. Well, I work in 2 shalas now, but I'd started my own program in the suburbs where I was getting up in the morning teaching Mysore. And that was kind of my focus. That's what I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life doing, going back and forth to India. And then like my hobby on the side was just reading about these crazy macabre stories, listening to true crime podcasts, listening to ghost paranormal stuff. That was just kind of a hobby I had from growing up and experiencing these things. And then when lockdown came, because the studio where I was running my program out of was so new, it could not survive the lockdown. And so I lost my program. Okay. And I believe it was Magdalene that was like, we'll just start a YouTube channel. And so when I first started doing my YouTube channel, the first episode I ever put up was about the Georgia Guidestones, which I think that one has also been taken down, which are the 10 commandments of the Satanists, basically. If you don't know about the Georgia Guidestones, guys, go look it up, because it's an hour and a half outside of Atlanta. And at that point, I knew that Georgia was the kind of the granite capital, but I had no idea about the idea that Georgia, where I live, is the real Egypt. I know that has only recently come into my realm of awareness, is that our whole geography is off.
Yeah, no, you've been speaking about that, and that's very fascinating. How, I mean, maybe, I don't know, if you can touch on that briefly. How did you come about that?
Somebody sent me a map of the United States saying that you need to look at this. And at first I was like, I kind of scoffed at it. I was like, no, I had that's not possible. Like, as white people, like, our ancestors came over here on boats, and, the whole story we're told as American kids, like the Patriot story, which was big in my family too, being proud of our Constitution, which I still am. I'm still extremely proud of the American Constitution, and what it stands for. But then I found Tartaria, and finding Tartaria, and I've often wondered, because the thing about me, I research these topics because I'm interested in them. If I'm not interested in a topic, I'm not going to research it. And growing up in school, I always was really good at history and English. That was always kind of the subjects. I retained information. I found it very fascinating. I think it's because even with the history we were told, it's the story of humanity. It's the story of humans and like how things happen and cause something else to happen. I remember dates. I remembered all that kind of stuff. And when I found Tartaria, obviously I kind of had this like crisis moment, because I was like, oh my God, this means that all the history that I've know and I've been taught is complete bullshit. It didn't happen. And then I realized, I was like, no, wait a minute. The fact that I remember the history is going to help me now disprove that the history I know didn't happen because of Tartaria, if that makes sense. Like, I can now deconstruct the lies we've been told, hopefully, by given the truth of Tartaria. And when I first started researching Tartaria, especially, there's a great long 7-hour documentary that Shanti and I on Aquarius Rising Africa are going over on Wednesdays. We're kind of doing a little decoding on it, and it's fantastic. It's called The Lost History of the Flat Earth, and it's not even really about the flat Earth. It's more about Tartaria. And when you watch this 7-hour documentary, and I know a lot of truthers out there have watched it, it is irrefutable evidence that we had this 1,000 years of peace that they call Tartaria, that our history we've been given, they've added stuff in, they've moved things around, they've changed everything. And the minute I realized that, the minute I went back and pulled up that map of the Americas that someone had sent me, and I started to dig, I started to research and dig and dig and dig and dig. And what I realized, I started looking especially at the state of Georgia where I live. Atlanta itself, the capital of Georgia, where was originally called Marthasville. And I always wondered, why did they change the name to Atlanta? There's also a lot of folklore around the city of Atlanta as far as the Fountain of Youth. We have a building here called Ponce City Market, and apparently underneath Ponce City, it used to be a government building, used to be a federal building. Apparently there's the Fountain of Youth under there that Ponce de Leon was looking for. And so my first thing was like, are they telling us that this was perhaps the capital of Atlantis? Is this where Atlantis was?
That makes sense.
Is that why because they have to tell you, right? Then I realized, well, there's a Rome, Georgia. There's an Athens, Georgia. There's a Cairo, Georgia, or as they say in down south, Cairo.
Wow.
Wild. And then I started talking to more and more people who work in and around Atlanta, and I realized there are all these pyramids here that are underground that we can't see.
Wow. And
they have to do with the granite, and what the granite was doing, the power of the granite, why we have the Georgia Guidestones here. They made them out of granite. And then I started going up into other areas of the Southeast, and I realized that through this theory that the mighty Mississippi River is actually the Nile. And what do we have on the Nile, or on the Mississippi River here in America? We have Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis. And then someone sent me a picture of a Sphinx in Memphis from 1912. That's not there anymore, that they got rid of. And then just recently, we've been discovering through research, my friend who also does a lot of research with me, that there are a lot of Isis temples here in America, specifically in the Grand Canyon. That's the first place. And any American knows that there's parts of the Grand Canyon the government will not let you go into.
Right.
Even though it's our land, it's, as Americans, this is we can't go into it because there's an Isis temple there. How are you going to explain that to the people? And I already knew that they had found a bunch of money, Egyptian money, all over America. Like, people are finding these things in their backyard with like Alexander Helios's face on it. So riddle me that. How did all this Egyptian money get here? Why are there Isis temples here when apparently they didn't even know this land was here?
So were the continents joined, or what is the story?
Well, they tell us we have that happened. I don't think so now. I think that they were interlocked through different lands that have been covered with the oceans now. So there's also, if you guys can Google it, there's if you look for the yellow brick road that was just found in the Pacific Ocean, underwater, a road, an actual road, cobblestone, yellow.
My goodness.
Why is there a cobblestone road under the Pacific Ocean? You know, shit's not adding up. What they told us in school is just not that. It's not adding up with the evidence that's coming forth so rapidly now. So I don't think our lands were actually connected the way they told us they were connected.
Right.
I think they were connected through different land masses that then got covered with ocean. I think that's how they were connected. But just recently, and I just recently spoke about this on Aquarius Rising Africa, there is also an Isis temple in the state of Tennessee, which Tennessee is directly above Georgia. It's a long state. It goes along very long. And the Isis temple is literally probably 3 hours north of me in this state park. So it's in a state park, which to me screams red flag. Whenever something is discovered and the government doesn't want you knowing the truth, what they confiscate the land and say this is now preserved land for the state. They trick you into thinking it's a good thing, but really what they're doing is they're trying to hide stuff from you. Well, then I started researching more into why the hell is there an Isis temple in Tennessee. Then you find that the name Isis was the Greek name for Isis and Osiris. The Egyptian name was spelled Essee. Tennessee is spelled Tennessee. So if you break that down, it's the country of Isis. So they're telling us in these states' names that this was Egypt, that this was the original Egypt. And so when you start to find stuff like that, you start to go, what the hell? And then there's a Tartaria group I follow on Facebook, and somebody showed pictures, actual pictures. If you watch the Tartaria documentary, he'll show some of these pictures too of the mud floods in the late 1700s, what we call the 1700s, and that these controllers actually moved artifacts from the Americas over to what we now know as Egypt. We see this, a lot of the mummies that have been found in what we see as northern Egypt, the mummies that have been excavated, they have cocaine on them. How do they have cocaine on them? That's from the Americas. How did a mummy, and we know that our ancient ancestors actually used the cocoa leaf for medicinal purposes. So it's not like they were like raging at the bar, they were actually using this stuff for medicinal purposes. But how did these mummies over in Africa, the top of Africa, have cocaine on them that's from the Americas? How is that possible? And a lot of the inner drawings shows corn. Corn comes from America as well. How did they have maize? How did they have corn on these tombs? And so there's a lot of questions that when you start to actually crack open the geography and what is the real geography, so many questions start popping up in your head, and all of a sudden you realize, these controllers, they're not stupid. They certainly aren't stupid. They've worked real hard. Oh, and there's the Mary Magdelene. So in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and this is another kicker for Tartaria, we see all these beautiful old buildings that they tell us were built at a certain time. But they were built at a certain time before these electrical instruments were created. And especially if you look at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., it's so detailed and so intricate. And there is actually a carving of Mary Magdelene in the rotunda of Washington, D.C.
Wow.
So why was there a Mary Magdelene there? I believe she's actually buried in Ottawa, Canada. I believe that her and Yeshua were living in this area, and they fled north when they had to flee north to Gaul. They're French Canadians. That's Gaul. That was the original. And that's where I think she's buried. I think she's actually buried in Ottawa at this point. I could be wrong. This is just where my research is leading me at this point to understand, to try to untangle all.
Right.
What's the Shakespearean quote? All the tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive. Whoever Shakespeare was, nothing's truer than that. We have been so tangled in these deceptions. And it's kind of fun. If you have to have an open mind. Obviously, this is very triggering for a lot of people.
It's like being turned completely inside out. But it fits with that whole reversal, technology that they've done. So, of course, it would fit that, like, yes. Egypt's on the other side. And, you know, who knows what was on this side. And then
that's what somebody asked.
You know,
like, Mississippi's the Nile. Then what's the Nile? I was like, I don't know. Maybe it's the Mississippi.
Exactly. Maybe we're the Americans. Yeah.
Like, well, I don't know.
On this end. Like,
but how, in my opinion, like I've been working with a lot of different, obviously in this Great Awakening, one of the most beautiful aspects of this Great Awakening is that humanity is finally like really coming together. We are each other's brothers and sisters. It doesn't matter what your nationality is. It doesn't matter what your race is. At this point, it doesn't matter. We are on the same team, all of us. It's us. It was never us against us. But when you start to see just the amount of BS they've fed us to divide us, to instinctively divide us against each other, so we would constantly be fighting each other and not looking at what they're doing. And that's what I think we're finding, is that all of us have been so manipulated, have been so deceived, that I think a lot of these held angers that we might have had from wherever we are in the world and what we've been taught are starting to leave us, because we're realizing that none of it's true anyway. None of these stories are true anyway. And so that's the most beautiful thing about untangling all these lies, is that it's just how beautiful humanity is, and how we all, whether you're English, French, American, African, we're all each other's brothers and sisters. We're all figuring this out together. And that must suck for the controllers, because they worked really, really hard to try to dupe us.
Wow. I know. They must be really.
They might be pissed. I'd be really pissed right now if I put all that energy and they were on YouTube figuring it out.
They do not sleep, these controllers. They do not miss they have been working very hard for a long time. It's unbelievable to watch the reveals.
Yes. And I don't think any of us that research are doing it by ourselves. We're all using each other's information and borrowing from each other to push the story along. And that's what's so beautiful. That's that Ram Dass quote, we're all just walking each other home. You know, we're all doing this together to try to figure out what our true history is and what really happened to us.
So I just want to jump around a little bit and just ask you, I know I was going to talk about the children, which if we can get to that at some point would be great, but just in terms of like sort of site placements and like sacred sites and stuff like that, have you done any research into Adam's calendar, Michael Tillinger's site?
That is not something I'm familiar with. So
Adam's calendar is almost like the Stonehenge of Africa. And there's a guy called Michael Tillinger who sort of like rediscovered it, although it was used by you know, many tribes and stuff like that for initiation for a long time, as a sort of a sacred labyrinth space.
I just pulled up pictures right now. It's pretty wild.
It's so interesting. And I wanted to tell you about it because it links in with the ISIS story. So apparently, and I don't know what your take about the Anunnaki is. I don't know what your timelines around the Anunnaki story, but you know, they came, this is the story that I know, they came about 500,000 years ago and set up a Genesis lab, you know, for genetic engineering. And there were two labs. One was in Mars, one was here on Earth. And this Adam's calendar site was one of the Genesis laboratories. And they basically used, you know, frequency for engineering. And this particular site is set up as a stargate for, you know, transportation of souls, the ones that would fit the bodies that they were engineering at the time. And this Genesis project took over, you know, it's kind of ongoing, you could say. Yeah. Genesis is like ongoing. So we're trying to still piece together what was Genesis really as well. But the reason why it's interesting linking into the ISIS story is because Genesis, breaking it down, genes of ISIS, right? Yeah. And so ISIS may have been somebody else before she was Isis. You know, she may have been like what they talk about with the Anunnaki. Do you know about the Anunnaki?
Yes, I do.
And
I do. And I actually believe, and I know there's a guy out there, Ishmael Perez. I have watched one of his interviews, and a lot of his research is, he's more into the galactics than I am, but we're finding some of the same stuff. I think that there's a lot of truth to that, in the sense that our actual bodies on a planet Earth, I believe, are a combination of multiple off-worlders.
Yeah.
I think that's why I don't believe the story of evolution in the sense that our genetics changed depending on where we lived in the world. I think that we have our certain hair color, eye color, skin color, whatever, depending upon which genetics were pulled from a galactic group.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I agree.
And I think that, and from what I'm paraphrasing what Ishmael Perez had said, like, we are some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. We just don't know it. And I think a lot of that has to do is that we're a hodgepodge of all these different galactic beings. And I have now, this is one thing that really gets people upset, which is fine. I don't care, because the truth needs to come out. You know, I've done a lot of breakdowns on the Bible, and it's become very apparent to me, especially reading the grimoires of Moses and Solomon, that the God of the Bible is Lucifer, not Source. It's Lucifer. And if you look at the Moses tablet, they tell the true story of the Egyptians and what happened with the Egyptians. And the Bible is actually following the bloodline of the banking family, in my opinion. That starts with an R, what we can't say on YouTube. But you guys know who I'm talking about. That's the family they're following and getting you to venerate. All right. And we know that both Yeshua and Magdalene were born Egyptian. They were born into an Egyptian family. They were born into the priesthood of Isis and Osiris. That's where we get the Essenes from. People know the Essenes. They were the priesthood, Essene, Essee.
Right, Besse again.
There we go. Tennessee, Essenes. They're telling you that they were in the priesthood of Isis and Osiris. Okay. Now, with that being said, especially when we look at the galactics and what we're talking about here with these stargates of using the genetics of Isis, which is what Genesis does mean, the genetics of Isis. If we look at the 12 tribes of Israel, the tribes that are spoken about in the Bible coming from Jacob, who was Israel, those are, even though they're talking about 12 tribes, if you go to Jacob's son Joseph, he had 2 sons who were also anointed. So that brings the number to what? 13. The bloodlines of the Bible are talking about, in my opinion, the 13 bloodline families.
It's very interesting breakdown. I mean, I've really enjoyed the way that you've spoken about it. You know, it's very controversial for people, and they are, you know, especially if it's a religious upbringing, it's quite traumatic to take these red pills, you know.
For sure.
But it is time, and now is the time, and there's enough supporting evidence coming from everywhere to help people sort of feel safe enough to start to dismantle things slowly but surely, you know.
And I grew up in a Presbyterian home, so I totally understand that. Like, you know, you go to Vacation Bible School and you're taught to like venerate Moses, but then you read his spell books and you're like, who the hell was this guy? Like, this guy was not someone I want to be venerating. Like, he's doing all this hoopity joopity hocus pocus stuff. And like, we don't want a Red Sea moment, guys. The Red Sea, him parting the Red Sea was black magic. And the Egyptians that were chasing him, they were chasing him because he stole their Egyptian Book of the Dead, which was originally called the Book of Bringing Forth the Light. And that's where we get the 10 Commandments from, guys. Moses did not go up on the mountain and have some psychedelic experience with God. The 10 Commandments come from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. That's fact. You can look that up. So the chariots chasing after the Egyptians, they were going to get their book back. They had asked, if you look historically, especially the Moses tablet, the Pharaoh had asked them to leave because they were doing so much damage to the Egyptian people because of their black magic that he asked them to leave, to get out of Egypt. The Moses tablet also says that the Egyptians were the ones worshiping one source God. And it was this group of these with Moses, the Hebrews, that were worshiping the Elohim. Well, it's Elohim, multiple gods. In the grimoires, the Elohim are also described as demons. The grimoires that they, you know, conveniently left out of the Bible. So you start to see the truth for what it is.
Yeah, it's quite a wild journey, I must say, but I wouldn't be missing it for the world.
No,
it's unbelievable. It's mind-blowing.
I know it's scary. I know it's scary for people to have their religion kind of shredded apart and stuff like that. I get that. It's totally terrifying. But I'm telling you guys, the real God, the real source creator is so loving. That's one thing I want to express to people. You know, I now know Jesus, the word Jesus means hail Satan. You guys can research. Like my friend Stephanie actually was the one that came across that. So they're laughing at you. They're laughing at you when you use the word Jesus. The J sound didn't even exist when Yeshua was around, okay? And Jesus takes the role of Mithra. Mithra, you can all look this up. Mithra is the God, it's identical to the Jesus story. Yeshua Ben Joseph, who married Magdalene and was the teacher of the Christ conscious, they were both teachers of the Christ consciousness, lived with the Essenes, they were in the priesthood of Isis and Osiris. He was never crucified. He was never crucified. Why wasn't he crucified? Because the God that we worship does not require blood sacrifices. Lucifer does. I mean, there's nothing more obvious to me than that now at this point. And they were preparing us through the churches to take communion, which is what? It's cannibalism. It's cannibalism. The real Christ was never crucified because the real God doesn't expect that. The real God, there's nothing you have to do to earn the love of the real God. He loves you. He helped create, even though they pulled particles of different galactic groups. Who do you think created those galactic groups? Who gave you that spark of life? That was the real source God. He doesn't want you. You don't have to invite the Holy Spirit into you. It's always been there the whole time. You were never separated from God. Never. And that's what's so liberating when people finally see that, you know, because in my experience, I've never met people more angry and hurt than those who are deeply embedded in the church. Right. And there's a reason for that. And it's because they are working off of a Luciferian system. And the minute you see that, you can separate yourself from that. Oh my goodness. The abundance of love that has always been there for you, that's been waiting for you to come back. Like, that's what's so beautiful. You don't have to take communion. You don't have to do these crazy blood rituals. It's not what the real God wants from you.
I know. I mean, I often say to people, you know, I mean, how, you know, would you know, if you were a parent, would you tell your child if they did something wrong, they'd burn in hell forever? I mean, what kind of a parent is that?
Exactly. And that's what cognitive dissonance, because they say in church, oh, God is love. He loves you so much. But if you do this or not do this, or if you don't believe enough, you're going to hell. No, guys. No, you're not going to hell. Rest assured, you are not. Even these crazy Satanists that are running our world, they're going to have to go through some type of karmic cleansing once they're removed from this planet. But even they aren't going to hell. They're just going to have to go through their karma and and have that, you know, that is cause and effect. Right. You are not, there's no way. Your life is, everybody watching right now, like you are the Messiah. You are the miracle. Your whole life, for that one sperm to hit that one egg. I mean, it's actually quite difficult for people to, I remember a long time ago, I was reading an article about how difficult it actually is. It's not as easy as people think it is to get pregnant. So if you were conceived, and what is it, by the time a woman's 30, she's had like 10 miscarriages she doesn't even know about. So you think, if that's true, you think about how many conceptions didn't work, but you worked, you grew and were born and you're alive. Like, you are the miracle. You are that speck of God. You are that genetics of Isis. You are that, that's you. It's not the church. It's not the controllers. It's you. And the controllers know that. They know how special you are. They know how powerful you are. That's why they've done all this stuff to try to confuse you and control you. Yeah. So take sovereign power back. The real God, The real God knows everything you've done, knows every bad thing you've done, knows every mistake you've made, and he loves you so much, even with all that. It's just such an overpowering love.
So, Brice, just a quick question around so I know I keep wanting to get to the children, but there's also this question of Yeshua's twin. I know I mentioned that, and it's very seldom spoken about. Do you know anything or have done any research on it? Or
yeah, so when I was reading the Gospel of Thomas, when I started, and that was Magdalene who prompted me to go into the missing books of the Bible that we have available. We don't have all of them available. We only have like 45 available. And they're like 777 under the Vatican. And now I understand that she was prompting me to go into the missing books because it opened up a whole other rabbit hole of what we were just talking about with other stuff too. So Thomas, the word Thomas, Didymous, means twin. And so when I first started breaking down, that was the first missing gospel that I read on my channel and on the Dark Outpost. And so with the missing books of the Bible, what I tend to do is I'll do a lot of research into where we were told they were found. I'll listen to a bunch of different commentaries from different people. And that was a huge assumption by a lot of scholars, even, that Thomas was actually Jesus or Yeshua's twin brother. And apparently from what I understood is when Yeshua was teaching, because he had, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, I actually think from my research and from having a relationship with Magdalene, I think she actually did more teaching than he did. To be honest with you guys, I think she was according to the Magdalene manuscript, which is I have right here, she was the one who actually activated him. So she was and if you, even in the Bible, with the parts of the Bible they took from Yeshua's story, she's the one who anoints him. And you don't have someone anoint you unless you believe they're spiritually superior to you.
Right. So she was like his teacher in some ways.
Yes. And his wife and his teacher.
Absolutely.
So she was and just knowing her and having her following my whole life. I mean, she'll laugh to me about how lazy Yeshua could be sometimes. That he was more of the lackadaisical, live and let live, and she was more of the very prompt and very organized one of the two, from what I've heard from her, and just again some research, like the Magdalene manuscript talks about that. And so, but with Yeshua and having a twin brother, a lot of scholars even believe his twin brother Thomas was used, because that's what Thomas means, his twin, was used as almost like a body double for him. So when there was too much of a crowd around him, they could just use the body double to move him around without being noticed. And I know that from what I've understood through my research is that the real Yeshua was half black, half white. He was mixed. Not what we see.
Black from where? What black from?
Who knows?
Not Arabic.
No. I don't think he was Arabic at all. I think but he was half black, half white. His mother was white. Well, they call her Mother Mary. My friend Stephanie found a name. So Mary, I know people have said Mary was a priestess name. No, Mary that's what they want you to believe. Mary was a Jane Doe name. So in the Bible, when you see all these Marys, those weren't their real names. That was the church's way of like taking their identity away from them. So Mother Mary, one resource says her name was Alma Mari. Alma Mari was her name. Magdalene, her name was just Magdalene. It wasn't Mary Magdalene. It was just Magdalene. I don't know about the other ladies, what their real names were, but so the mother, from what I understand of my research, mother was white, Alma Mari, and Joseph, the real father, was black.
Okay.
White. So apparently there is one painting of Jesus or Yeshua, the real Yeshua, that is underneath the Vatican that we've never seen. The picture of Jesus that we see in our churches and stuff is actually of a man named Cesare Borgia. Cesare Borgia was a son of one of the popes, and the Borgia family were gangsters, to say the least. As they still are. As they still are. Nothing.
Yeah, that fits the picture perfectly. We kind of get that.
Yeah. And so
a bunch of renegades running this planet.
Let me tell you, if your Showtime here in America did a whole series over the Borgias, if your family has a whole series done about you, you would definitely come from a fucked up family, because there was so much drama. I mean, Lucrezia, his daughter, I mean, there was just so much drama within this family of this Pope. And Cesare is the picture we see of what we call Jesus, is Cesare Borgia, painted by Da Vinci. Cesare was a lover of Da Vinci's. Now, if you Google or for people who are watching, why was this important for us to have this idea of what Jesus looked like in our heads? Well, it's MK Ultra mind control, first of all. So we have this idea of what Jesus looked like. And it also comes down to, again, the original Project Bluebeam. Now, we think about Project Bluebeam, we think about aliens, right? Mm-hmm. But there was this man named Sergei Monast. He was a French Canadian. And in the mid to late 90s, he started whistleblowing about Project Bluebeam. Except at that point, he was a journalist, investigative journalist, back when journalism was more integral. Mm-hmm. He found information that they were going to put a hologram up in the sky of Jesus to get people to go into the New World Order.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So this is why, for a very long time, that's one thing about the Cabal that I'll give them. They're smart and they're patient. This is why they had to have a painting of Jesus that could be indoctrinated everywhere all over the world to get people to in their mind to think that's, so when they put it up in the sky.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. And it ties into the Anunnaki story as well, because the Anunnaki, you know, were kind of like the gods that came from the sky down. And then Enlil, who was one of the brothers who was involved in the laboratories here, sort of tried to spin himself off as God, you know. Yeah. And it's like, so that's how people point up, you know, like God's up there and he's a man with a beard and, like, you know, looks like the Anunnaki. And I think that's, so that you know, that impression, that's the you know, the R's, all the R's that have tried to carry on their, you know, their rule.
Yeah. Well, there is a, I actually just, because I'm going through the Sophia Code on my channel, and I actually just filmed for Mother Mary, and there is a our family, Baker family son, family member, probably around my age, who looks just like the painting of Jesus. And so it makes you wonder, were they going to use him to be the second coming? I don't know. I think that plan got a little squashed because Sergei Monast kind of blew the whistle on that. So I think they switched then to aliens. But, you know, I was saying on Shanti's channel, like, there's this mantra: knowledge is power, knowledge protects, and knowledge is infinite. And none of us have all the answers. But when you start to understand this stuff, you can protect yourself. You know, if you see a Jesus in the sky one day, you can be like, wait a minute. I know that the painting of Jesus is Sergei Borgia or Cesare Borgia. So that's not Jesus. What the hell's going on? So you're not going to be duped into falling into the New World Order, the Great Reset, right? And that's why knowledge protects. And just because religion is unraveling doesn't mean that there's no God. Of course there's a source creator. Of course there is. We've just been we've been duped, and he's always been here, but we've been so distracted by the dogma of the Cabal that we haven't realized that the person that they were worshiping in churches is Lucifer, not source God.
Yeah, wild, absolutely wild. I remember my mom saying her friend's child, someone used to have this picture of Jesus hanging on a cross and dripping with blood and the whole thing, you know, into the bedroom, and this child walked in and said, like, Jesus Christ, Mom, they've hung a guy on the cross, you know, like, that's terrifying.
Yes. You know? Well, that was always the Catholic churches. You go to Catholic churches and it's just so gruesome. It's like desensitizing you to this form of torture. And, you know, my niece and nephew are being raised Catholic because my brother-in-law's family's from Italy, and that's cool. But I'll be at mass with them for certain events, and I'm just focused. I'm like, you know, I just focus on his 6-pack. Like, what kind of diet was he on? Because, man, that's a good looking 6-pack, Jesus. You know, like, what was your workout program? Because wow, you know. But it's kind of, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's where the freedom lies. And I do think that there's so many amazing people in this truther community that are still so programmed into the church. And that's the thing. It's like, we know this is a spiritual battle. We know that's, at the end of the day, that's what this is. It's not just an information war, it's a spiritual battle. But you have to understand, especially here in the United States, all of the churches in the United States are 501c3s. That's a non-profit. So that means that they're affiliated through the government. So even though they're not a for-profit business, they're still run by the government. Well, who does the government worship? You know, it's like in our money here in America, it says, in God we trust. What God are they talking about, guys? They're talking about Lucifer. Rest assured the Federal Reserve is not interested in the true source creator. Right,
absolutely not. So in your deconstruction of the story, did Yeshua die? And then is there an ascension process, or what is it?
I think the ascension or the resurrection story that they stole from the original story is really the resurrection of your own Christ consciousness. Is what, if you study the priesthood of Isis and Osiris, the obelisk that they tell us is Osiris's genitalia is not Osiris's genitalia. It's your spine. That's what the obelisk is. It represents the rising of Kundalini, or the Christ consciousness, through Sushumna. That's your resurrection of who you truly are. There's different accounts of Yeshua. Some people believe that his real body is buried in the Grand Canyon. I think Magdalene is in Ottawa. But then there are other off-worlder sites that say he was actually just picked up on a ship and they left at the fall of Tartaria, because that was the 1,000 years of peace. So if you're looking at the book of Revelation, which is one of the most honest of all the books of the Bible, we know that the apocalypse already happened. That was the fall of Atlantis, was the apocalypse. The floods came in, flooded out, created our bigger oceans, flooded out roads and stuff. And then there was the tribulation. And then you have the 1,000 years of peace, which was Tartaria. This was when the rule of Magdalene and Yeshua and their children, who are the Merovingians, which I've done a huge breakdown on the Merovingians. Okay. And then after the 1,000 years of peace, that was the deal that source creator made with Lucifer. He was going to let them go, let the Draco go, let Lucifer go for a short period of time before the final battle, where humans would decide which person they wanted to worship, the true source God or Lucifer. That's called Gog and Magog. That's where we are right now in our timeline, which is really good news for us. See, a lot of Christians believe that we're at the apocalypse because they're being fed the story of that we've been taught in our school system, in our churches, that the apocalypse hasn't happened yet, but it absolutely has happened. And if you study Tartaria, you start to see that the apocalypse has happened already. And so what that means is that we're going to ascend. Earth is going to ascend, because the only thing is we don't know if we're going fourth density negative or fourth density positive. Probability is we're going positive, but there's still that small chance that they could hijack it. That's why it's really, really, really important for people to research, to understand that they are trying to mess with your emotions. They're trying to mess with your vibrational frequency. The churches, make no mistake about it. Make no mistake about it. The churches work for the Cabal. They are part of the Cabal. No mistake about it. Whether your pastor knows they're working for the Cabal or not is a totally different story. But the organization, if you follow the money in seminary schools, study I did that. When I started to figure this out in my own head, like, I don't think that this is good. I started looking at all the seminary schools here in America, and I started following the money to see where the money's coming from. It's all coming from the same people who own the media, who own the universities, who own the medicine, those 13 families. That's who's puppeting the churches. And they understand that your thoughts as a human being are going to dictate the future. So what they're trying to do in these churches is they're trying to scare the living shit out of you to make you think that the apocalypse is here. Because what happens after the apocalypse is the tribulation, where people get beheaded, all that kind of stuff. So they're trying to keep you in a very low vibration of fear so that they can hijack the ascension to go negative. And that's my biggest thing. I just want to shake people right now and be like, that's my biggest thing. They're lying to you. They're lying to you because we're not there. We're here. And
wow, it's just such a crazy time because, you know, like there are so many key figures in this, you know, consciousness movement that are, you know, saying like, that are going very biblical, that are, you know, key people. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking of people like 107, you know, some of those people that like saying, okay, Osiris is the devil, you know, for example, and this and that. And it's quite a meltdown, I must say, for people, to find their way through it.
I've done shows with 107 before. I really like him. But this is what I'm saying to you guys is that, you know, the guy who did the Tartaria documentary said it best. Once one programming dissolves in your head, the backup programming kicks in. And so what I believe, some of these people are just still very much indoctrinated into the church, and they haven't figured it out yet that is part of the cabal too.
Yeah, and that's where your work is so important, because you have been anchored in that. I didn't grow up religious, you know, so I didn't get that heavy indoctrination. So it hasn't been as difficult for me to make the adjustments. But I think it's very important, you know, just to get, you know, a voice like yours heard in as many different corners as possible, because it's still out there with people that are doing really incredible work. They say, you know, they're still putting out the pictures of Jesus hanging on the cross like this and bleeding and, you know, suffering and sinning and, you know, and like, it's just, you know, it's got to be deconstructed to something else.
All sin means, you guys, all the word sin means is to miss the mark. That's all it means, is to not remember who you are. Let's break this down for a minute. Let's take one of these 10 commandments. Let's say like about coveting the other person's wife, the adultery one. Let's look at that one, for example. That's a sin, right? It's a sin. Yeah, it kind of sucks to have that happen to you. We understand that. But let's just say that someone does that. Let's say they have an affair. They're in a marriage and they have an affair. Okay, let's look at what happens from that point. Both couples get divorced. Well, let's say the people who had an affair end up getting married and have another child. Well, that child is still a spark from God. And let's say the couples that they left didn't find other spouses that have a happier marriage. And let's say that there are lessons learned from that. Let's say that everybody involved in this karmic situation learned something, learn how to handle things differently, learn to have more empathy for other people because there was a lot of hurt involved. If we look at all these situations where there's friction, where there's sin, if handled properly, it's one of the most important things that could happen to you, because it
gives you your pearls, all the pearls of your life experience. You have to, you know, sin, because otherwise you can't learn.
You can't learn. And so like, let's say, so in the child that maybe was born out of this affair, this sin, is that child now scarred? Absolutely not. That child is also a child of God. And then that takes in our own accountability too, because make no mistake about it, you were also a part of planning your life path before you took this body. You sat down with your creator, not Lucifer, source God, and your guides, and you mapped out your earth school. You mapped out what type of lessons that you wanted to learn and where you felt like your soul needed to grow. And so a lot of the things that happen to us in these major life events that happen to us in our life were things that you actually agreed to let happen to you so that you could grow and learn. And once you realize that, once that clicks in your head, do you become powerful as a person?
Right. Because and that's what the Cabal did not want.
Exactly.
So put all those things in place so that you do not move.
Exactly. You
do not grow, do not learn, do not risk.
I mean, they want you to actually believe that there is a source outside of yourself that can save you. No one else. And that's what we see in a lot in the Truther community too. That's driving me crazy. Everybody's sitting around eating popcorn, waiting for the Kennedys to do something. No one's coming to save you. We got to do this ourselves. We are the storm. When Mr. T said the storm is upon us, he meant you watching right now. You were who he was talking about.
Right.
You waking up. Because once we fully wake up and our vibration shifts and we turn this ship around, that's when it all changes. You're the storm. But if you sit there thinking, oh my God, it's the apocalypse and Osiris is the devil, and you
I might go to hell if I do anything, say anything.
Exactly.
What a prison. What a setup.
What a prison. What a prison.
What a perfect prison of consciousness.
Yes. That is what a lot of religions, and I come from the Christian background, so that's the one that I attack the most because I know more about it. Now, I've been out of the church for over 20 years. And so I think that, and of course, I was always a little bit more open-minded anyway as a child. And of course, I spent a lot of time in India, so I'm very familiar with the Hindu faith, and then just thought it was beautiful. I've never been someone who really thought that, even when I was in the church, I don't think I ever really truly believed that if you didn't believe my one faith that you're going to, I never was of that mindset. And I've said this before, my good friend growing up, I said this last time with Shanti and Morning, my really good friend growing up was Muslim. And I remember asking my mom, like, are they going to go to hell? And my mother saying, I don't understand the mysteries of God, but I know that your friend and her family are going to be in heaven with us. And so having parents that were more understanding and more open-minded was also very valuable too. But my friend Stephanie, who does a lot of work with me, she's fresh out of the church, fresh out of the church. And so she has a really unique perspective when researching all of this stuff. She literally, her fall from the church happened so fast. I mean, she reads tarot cards now, and it hasn't even been a year since she left the church. Right. And the thing about tarot cards and astrology, guys, the Cabal tricked you on that too. And that information's out there. You just got to look up the Hess Act. In World War II, the Nazis made a deal with the Pope that they would start a propaganda campaign against divination tools so that people would think it was wrong to use divination tools, so that it would sever our connection to spirit even more. They would have the upper hand.
I know it's a little bit like what's happening to us now as truthers. Like you have to kind of go into like some kind of weird code to talk to each other. That's like a little bit like what happened with the tarot. It became code. Take the book that was wisdom and make it into something unrecognizable. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're somebody that's yelling at people for using any type of divination, you're basically spewing Nazi propaganda. And that's why knowledge protects. How many times has a pastor said something in your church service and you've gone, I'm going to go look that up because that doesn't sound right. No, people just take their word for it because they're a pastor. Well, let me tell you, does your pastor wear a black robe when he does his service? Because those black robes are telling you that he's part of the cult of Satan, of Saturn. They're telling you. That's why a judge wears a black robe. Now, Saturn itself was created by God, and hopefully we'll get the Saturn planet back to its original template. They've abused it and inverted it. But for now, knowledge protects. If your pastor's wearing a black robe, rest assured, they're telling you he's part of the cult of Satan. Amazing.
So why are you going to take advice from him? Look it up. Don't even take my word for it. Look up everything I say.
Yeah. Yes, it's time. It's time for people to make these moves. And
about damn time, for sure. Somebody asked me, like, what do we do with our Bibles when all this is done? I was like, well, that paper is really good for rolling a particular plant that God put on this earth. So there's use for that Bible yet.
Right. We have to transmute those old poisons into something useful. Get high on
medicinal that God gave us for our own health and well-being. So it's all good. Everything. I know that this information is scary for people because it's so different from what we've been trained to believe, but it's so freeing. Once it clicks, oh my gosh, it's so freeing. You just feel that
absolutely,
abundant love, just there's no conditions to that love. It's just there for you.
Yeah, beautiful. So Brice, I think we should wrap it up with that, because that's a really amazing piece of, suppository, red-pilled suppository with a lot of love.
Yes, with love.
So I think it would be amazing to chat to you again at another point.
Sure.
Maybe there's another topic that comes about. Maybe we can, go into the Merovingian sort of lines. And I mean, there's so many areas. And I know you're doing a lot of work with Aquarius Rising Africa and a lot of people. But, you know, it would be such a pleasure and a privilege to chat to you again.
Listen, of course, we're all in this together. We're all on the same team. We're all, you know, that's the beautiful thing about it, is like, we're all just walking each other home. We literally, and everybody watching right now, we are on the battlefield together, you know? So yeah, I would love to come back. If your viewers have any questions, let me know. I'd love to answer any questions they might have or confusion. So
okay.
for sure.
Fantastic. And I actually sent somebody who had questions about their own links to the Merovingian bloodline to you the other day. So there's already all sorts of links, because I've been posting your videos to some of my groups, and I've been like,
oh, cool.
This woman is doing such amazing work.
Well, I think I have a hunch that most of us who have platforms, and you guys watching, I think we're all descendants of the Merovingians. I think that's what they don't want us to know too, is that that's what makes us different from them, is that I think we actually do carry that descent. And that's why the 5 children that's why they didn't want, if they want you to believe they maybe had a kid, they'll say 1, but no, there were 5. So all of those.
Where did they go? Where did they go?
They're in us. They're our ancestors. You know, so, you know, that's what I want everybody. You are so, to the person watching right now, yes, I'm talking to you, the person who's watching right now, you are so special. You have no idea how valuable you are. Like, you are royalty. Okay. I want, and that's what they don't want you to know. Okay. So be that royalty, take your sovereignty back, because you are so valuable. God didn't put you here on this earth at this time for nothing. Right? You can handle this, and we're taking our planet back.
Absolutely. Brice, thank you so much. You're so incredible, and we love you so much here in South Africa.
Oh, I love you guys.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon.
Absolutely, 100%. I'll see you guys soon.
Okay, lots of love. Bye-bye.
Bye.